So the existential challenges of growing up, Phil, that we can go in many angles.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What are you thinking? Telling me what's it all about?
It was interesting. I think when you first said, "Hey, look, why don't we have a conversation?" and you kind of said, "What do you want to talk about? What's on your mind?" I think one of the things that has been, I guess, prevalent in my life is obviously that transition from the youthful 20s to now more of the mature 20s. I know you'll empathize with this, as I'm sure many people will.
Hmm.
But it was something that was topical because now I'm hitting that sort of late 20s where I've got a bunch of friends that are getting married, having kids, and there's that natural comparison that I think, myself included, but I think a lot of people my age tend to have to put themselves through, and so I think that was kind of topical. I think it was something that I felt you would probably be able to shed some light on. Given that there's probably only a few years differences in our age, but it was just something that I knew, that you had been through, many other people have gone through, and it's something that I'm currently living, right? So I thought, rather than pick a specific thing, I went, you know what, the biggest thing you can do is by putting the word existential into it, but it's really just about all those challenges and I guess circumstances that you find yourself in as you grow up, and that's true, whether it's teenage years,
Mm.
20s, 30s, whatever. But it was just something that I thought would be good to talk about. Yeah, so only recently, actually, one of my best friends had his first kid. And that
Wow,
was nice. And it was,
congratulations.
yeah, I'm first. Actually, it's the second. Like I've been privileged to grow up with a really close, tight knit group of friends. The same seven guys for almost 2 decades now. And so it was the first two babies are now within the circle, and obviously we had a first wedding as well. At the beginning of last year, and so a lot of these things are happening.
Yeah.
It's a different part of our lives. We went from shooting hoops and being fools back in the day to now like real world problems.
Yeah.
you
Hey, it's
know,
pretty
so
cool. It's pretty cool how you have those seven group of mates. Um, you're still together. It's brilliant, eh?
oh man, it's I say this over and over and over again, right? So it's lucky enough to find one, maybe two people that you connect with on a level that lasts or that goes beyond just childhood and those basic overlaps in personality or whatever causes you to be friends when you're younger. And I've been lucky enough to have seven. And it's obviously gone up and gone down, but there's been that core group of friends that we keep in touch. We do as much as we can together, and it was nice that everyone's partners as well. We all got along with each other. A couple of them went to our school, so it's I consider myself blessed when it comes to that, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's been good.
And you mentioned Phil comparison. Um, hitting that age where you're seeing your friends obviously get married, have kids. Well, why do we compare, Phil? Like, I'm not going to lie to you. When I was sort of your age, I'm not saying there's a huge gap, right? But I'm saying we have that. Like if John's having a kid and Billy's getting married and I'm still sort of single per se, and I can't hold down a couple of dates. I never really have that comparison point in a way. Why do you think that's the case, Phil?
Look, that is a good question. Now, just before I give an answer, by the way, I forgot to say at the beginning of all of this, congratulations. Amidst this topic, it is very important to say that welcoming someone into the family is always a cause for celebration.
It's
So,
when the time, if and when the time comes, Phil,
yeah,
and you become a dad, you don't know until you do it, and it's the greatest reward. It is.
yeah,
It's I can't describe it. It's an amazing feeling. I'm thankful that my son looks like me. I shared a photo with my cousin.
yeah,
She's 10 years older than me, and she played a huge part of my life when I was growing up.
yeah,
So she saw me sort of become a baby and grow up and get a bit older. And I sent her a photo of my son, and she goes, "You know what? I'm looking at you when you were the same age."
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
pretty funny to have a mini me walking you around. He has a lovely sense of humor. He's a smart ass, and he's only
Yeah.
4.5 years old.
That's exactly like you then.
No, I appreciate it, Phil. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, getting back to your circle of friends,
Yeah.
inevitably, when you get a bit older, I need to go to you, Phil. We're chatting at 5 p.m. today.
Mm.
You make time, I make time. And
Yeah.
but when I'm with you, I'm with you.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I hear that. But look, let me answer that question that you had about why we compare, and I've tried to spend some time thinking about this just to, I don't know, try and come up with an answer that I think makes
I'm
sense
sure
to
you
me,
can. I'm sure you
and
can.
perhaps validate the reasons we do it. And I think it actually, interestingly, it has some parallels to growing up, I find, in a ethnic family, or in a family that I think um, essentially has a blueprint for how you should live your life, right? So, growing up in an Indian family, there's always that, that I won't even say expectation, but let's go with that word. That this is how you should live your life, right? You grow up in a small community of other Indians, ideally. You share similar values, similar traits. You go through high school, you graduate, you get a degree, you graduate, you get a job, you work, you get married. And so there's this like timeline that I suppose we're meant to follow. Now, obviously, as a new generation, we have the luxury, and particularly as a new generation in a first world country, in a more predominantly Western society, we've obviously got the freedom, the luxury to be a bit more liberal with our thought. We're able to go a little bit wider than what perhaps our parents, grandparents could have done, which is where they would have gotten their idea of a blueprint. But I think as a result, we form these ideas of this is what we should be doing at any given time. And for the most part, that's helpful. It's good. It's a guiding light for us to live our lives by. But then what you end up finding yourself doing is this comparison, which is, well, when someone else does it first, and let's say we're the same age, well, am I falling short? Like, am I doing something wrong? And I would imagine that they may think the same, but the difference is that they're further along that blueprint that we're talking about. And so I think that's kind of where it starts, and then it starts to manifest itself in other areas of your life. It might not just be in your let's say in your personal life. It could be in other areas. Well, someone's a bit more of a senior manager than I am, and we're the same age. Am I falling short? Am I doing something wrong? Like it's all these little things, and I think it's only when and I would probably go out on a limb and say that you've probably had this realization as well with your experiences. I know I've been lucky enough to have had this experience super early on in my life. Is that when you get to a point and you where you're either encouraged or directed, or sometimes even just your hand is forced to think about what's important, to think about those deeper questions about how you should be conducting yourself, how you should be living your life. You start to realize what's truly important, and what you should be focusing your time and effort on. And I think that allows you to break away from this comparison and this expectation that's always been set, and that you're trying to sort of chase. And so I think that's probably been my outlet. I don't know. What do you think? So you're obviously you've had plenty more experiences in this kind of a field, So what do you think would be the reason why we compare ourselves to each other? It doesn't necessarily need to be personal, but
I think your blueprint theory, Phil, bang on the money.
Should I trademark that? I might trademark that.
I think you should.
Yeah,
I think just keep in mind that I'm recording this. I own the rights, so I'm not too sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, cool. All right, I might blueprint it just in case it becomes a thing.
I think you're bang on the money. It's very much. I look at the blueprint theory that you've proposed. I think you're bang on the money. But if I dig a bit deeper and peel the layer back a bit more, I think it's innately in us that we always want what we can't have. And I think that sort of stems from that.
What do you mean by that? So when you say some things that we can't have. So what is it, do you think, right now that you would want, but you know that you can't have?
I'm in a very happy place now, Phil. I don't need anything. I don't want anything.
Yeah.
What I need, I have. What I want is very much my family now, because like what you said, you really realize, whether it's through COVID or whether it's through my illness that I shared with you back in the past, there's prioritization in life, and there's an understanding that you shouldn't really take life too seriously at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But getting back to your question on the whole comparison thing, I think you're pretty much banging the money on the whole blueprint theory. We all go through life, trying to hit those certain hurdles, jump through certain hoops, and whether they are laid out for us or whether it's planned or whatnot, it's very much a blueprint of how life should be. And if you go into life and you try to break away from it, I'm sure you would agree that there are times where people may look down upon you or sort of think you're crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
By
Absolutely.
going and veering into a different path. I think for me, Phil, how I deal with the comparison, just getting back to your question about where it comes from, I think you're pretty much spot on the blueprint theory. How I deal with it is that by speaking with so many people, whether it be via these podcasts and going through my experiences, you sort of realize that everyone literally goes through their own journey. So you really can't compare apples with apples, because I'm going this way, Phil, you're that way, your mate's going up, someone's going sideways. You really can't compare. And then you ask yourself, why are you comparing when life is so different for people? So getting back to your theory, I think, unfortunately, when we do have that preconceived notion of how one should live, we inevitably get anchored back to how we should live when we know deep down that I don't think I want to go down that path, but you might get looked down upon, be frowned upon. So I think it takes a lot of courage to go down a different path.
Definitely. And I think one of the really, I'd say one of the things that I probably did a little bit wrong was when that first idea came about in my mind. Obviously, it's something that becomes relevant in the home. Obviously, I had these kinds of discussions with my parents, with my friends, grandparents, and there are very differing, there's a variety of responses that you get to that. And I think whilst initially I kind of went, well, I don't think it's right that this blueprint or this idea is placed on me and I'm supposed to live my life this way, because you get that from your parents, you get that from the people that are looking out for you, and they only know that the world that they grew up in, they know the world or they see the world in a certain way, and they give you the guidance to the best of their knowledge. And I think the world that we're in is drastically different to the world that they grew in, and not just practically, not just even from a technology standpoint, but even from your fundamental moral values, from the things that, let's say, are more religious, because I would say more people were probably more religious over the last few decades than they have been in the most recent ones. There's big differences. And so, that blueprint that may have worked a little while ago may not necessarily work now. And so I think that's something that I tackled a few times. And I think similar to you, I've found a pretty nice wavelength to live on. I find myself being generally pretty stress-free. I find myself being quite content, quite happy with the decisions that I've made and the direction that I've gone, both personally and professionally. So when these types of topics come up and these types of challenges come up, I actually don't think I've got such a I don't feel like it's a massive burden to think about it and figure it out and move on. It doesn't take up a lot of headspace, because I think I'm generally pretty happy with where things are at.
What caused that, Phil? I think when we were working together, Phil, I think you always had that very optimistic view on life. Was there a specific event or catalyst that made you question that blueprint in a positive way?
Question it in a positive way.
Because what you're
Uh,
sharing with me is that you've acknowledged that there is a blueprint to life that is probably being passed down by your parents, rightly or wrongly. And you've come to the realization that, hey, maybe this blueprint's not really important to me. And I can live a life that is more me, which is
mm,
fantastic to hear, Phil, right?
yeah.
How did you
Well,
how did you get to that?
yeah. Look, how I got to that, I don't think I could tell you. It's kind of like the intricacies of every little decision, every experience, every micro experience that I've had. Every single day up until now. But I think um, I think it might be slightly different to that last description of it. I don't think it's a matter of saying that the blueprint, and I think that blueprint term, I think loosely refers to things like, well, what's my purpose? What do I want to do? What makes me happy? The meaning of life. I think there was an episode you had a little while ago around the meaning of life, which I thought was a really nice topic to be able to openly talk about with. Um, but I think that's what blueprint sort of entails. It's all of these things that end up giving you some direction in how to operate, how to live, and I think it slightly varies from saying that in its entirety it's not for me. I think what it's more about is taking those guiding principles and adapting it to what you think is appropriate, all things considered, and in the
Hmm.
context to which you live. So I'll give you an example. So when we talk about some of those baseline moral values that religion gives, now my parents were my family are quite religious, I would say, and they like to bring us up around the church, around fellow Christians, in a church community, and it was nice. And now growing up, obviously, you start to spend less time thinking about those things and doing your own thing. But what I realized was, whilst I might not be as serious about religion, which was a part of that blueprint that I think they wanted me to grow up in, what I realized was there was actually a lot of good things that I could take away from being in a community like that, which was those baseline moral values. Be kind to each other, love each other, be nice to each other.
Lovely.
A lot of those things they sort of transcend religion. It's just a good
It's
attribute to have.
foundational somewhat.
Absolutely. And so what I realized was, whilst they might have said, look, we always want you to go to church, I might have said, all right, well, look, that might not be fully for me, but here are the things. And to this day, I still hold in a high regard. These are the things that I really take from what initially was considered to be what I should do now to, well, I'll take what I think will really help me, but there'll be other things that I want to, prioritize or focus on. So I think it's really just about adapting those guiding principles to the context of the world that you live in. And why that's important is because it's more than likely, and I'll bet you've already done it, or at least have already thought about it, but it's something you're probably going to pass on to your kids. Well, this is how I interpret my world, right? And now I'm going to share that with you. And it's up to you whether you see the same thing, whether you see it differently. Obviously, that's I guess part of the journey. But I think that's probably something I'll end up doing, right? Taking all the things that I've learned and experienced, sharing that, passing that on to my kids one day, and
Yeah.
they'll do what they will with it.
I sort of realized when you're a parent now, Phil, was that everything you do is essentially becoming part of your son or daughter's blueprint because he or she doesn't know any better. So he would look at you. Now obviously my daughter's only 6 weeks old, so probably not yet, but my son's 4.5. He sees everything I do. He remembers everything. So it's a good reminder to always set a good example, more in a sense of what I do, not what I say.
Mm, mm.
You know,
Well, I
the
suppose
whole,
for now, right? Then eventually it'll start becoming what you say.
well, here's the thing, right? Like, you know how people every day, hey, don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that, right? But then physically they do that.
Yeah,
So it's a bit of an oxymoron when your son might see you go, hey, don't eat ice cream, but then here you are, for example, hiding behind the fridge, going.
Yeah, yeah.
So you make a good point, like, and you are building that blueprint for him.
Mm,
And you're right, when he gets to a certain age, I do hope that I give him enough of a foundation. I essentially want to help him develop his tree trunk for analogy's sakes. So I want to make
yeah,
sure I give him that core, whether it's those foundational beliefs of just being nice to people, treating people with respect, embracing diversity of thought, which is
mm,
a big part of this podcast. You have that
yeah,
sort of trunk. And then when you grow up, you're going to be adding branches left, right, and center, right?
yeah,
You do whatever you want.
yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
much looking forward to that.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think it's nice that we have the luxury to take our time and think about that. Like, I wholeheartedly get that, particularly for a lot of families that perhaps have migrated from countries that didn't really allow them to take the time to think about how they want to live their life. It was all about, I need to make something of myself. I need to make something for my family. And so I think whilst we go about our lives doing all this, it's always important to not forget or not pay enough mind or gratitude to, I always say this, gratitude to my parents for obviously doing the things that they did in order for me to have the luxury of thinking a bit more liberally or thinking a little bit more freely with how I want to operate, what I want to do with my life. And so, they'll always, friends and family will always be saying things to point you in the right direction to the best of their knowledge. Otherwise, they wouldn't be considered friends or family. But yeah, I think I think it's just about taking what you can from what you're given and molding that into the right shape and running with it. Seeing what works for you, what doesn't, and that's all part of the journey, right? And
Yeah.
then when you're on your deathbed, you can say, "Great, it worked out," or maybe it didn't. Who knows? But
Hey, as long as you gave it a crack, right?